Welcome back to the Adrenal Fatigue Podcast. It's Angela here, and today we are breaking food myths. With the influx of information on the internet, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed by how to approach food when you're burnt out and struggling with your hormones. There's so much information out there, so many opposing points of view that can make it really hard for the average person to figure out how to eat. And then you add exhaustion, stress, and an inability to make decisions to that mix, which are common symptoms of adrenal fatigue, it becomes all the more difficult. It's enough to make people incredibly anxious when it comes to making food decisions, and it can stop us from making any decisions, dietary changes, period, which can keep us stuck in a variety of ways. And we want to make this easier for you. Today, we have our co-host, our co-founder and our in-house nutrition expert, Danielle to help sift through some of the food chaos and bring a bit of clarity to this hot topic. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Angela. This topic just gets me going, and I'm so excited to dive into this with our listeners today because I hope to bring just like a lot of peace to your minds by the end of this episode.
So true, and I know you will. So shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay. So when it comes to eating for burnout, what should someone's top focus be?
When it comes to figuring out where to begin, it can be so overwhelming. And right now, there's never been more information available to us online and just everywhere, right? And so much of it conflicts, and it can be so hard to make a decision, like you were just saying. And it can lead to a lot of food anxiety, and it can just lead to just like freezing because you don't know what exactly to do to move forward. And that becomes so overwhelming in itself, especially when you're fatigued, that it just really, really holds you back from, like you said again, making progress, making a decision, and then doing anything about it. So you just get caught in this cycle of feeling overwhelmed and not knowing what to do. So when it comes to figuring out like what your top focus should be, I think the most important thing to remember is just like getting really real with yourself for a minute and taking a look at your current diet and your current situation and what you've been eating up to this point. And I mean, it's not going to be all food focused. Like, it's not going to be completely the diet that got you to this stage of burnout that you might find yourself in right now. But I want you to look at like what you've been nourishing your body with in general and what has been working. And like intuitively think about what's been working, but also symptomatically, and when I say symptomatically, that might make more sense on the other end of the spectrum when I say like what hasn't been working. So think about what has been working and what you think like isn't really serving you right now. And like what feels good for you intuitively, but also do you react to certain foods? And do you know that you're reacting to certain foods, but still continue to eat them? So this is where you can get really real at just like looking at your situation and thinking about I'm tired right now. If I had to make one change this week, what could I do that would make a really big impact this week? And maybe for some of you, that's adding certain foods in. And maybe for some of you, it's taking certain foods out, like really triggering foods or really inflammatory foods out. Or maybe for others, it's a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B, but really just looking at where you are right now and just making one step in the right direction. And then we can build on it from there.
Love it. Okay, I want to stop right there and ask you. So when you say taking inventory, and I love the idea of like honest inventory, right?
Yeah.
Without judgment, but just inventory of your current diet, what you're eating. Like, what's one simple way for people to do this? Like, what's your best secret about like how to take inventory in a way that's like, going to serve but not too overwhelming?
That's a good question. So some people would want to journal it out and kind of look at a day. And I think that that can be great. And there's different levels to this. So if you wanted to take like one hardcore approach, MyFitnessPal, and this is something I recommend to clients all the time. MyFitnessPal, it's a free app. Anybody can just create an account and it's really easy. There's a huge database of food in there that you can just plug in what you eat and at any given day or any given week. I mean, just track it for a little bit. That can give you a really good insight as to like how many calories are you eating, like how much protein, how much carbs are you getting every day, just like you can kind of see the big picture macros that you've been kind of fueling yourself with. But what I like about when you track like that, it also kind of forces you to look at the quality of foods in a big picture sort of way and a more objective kind of way on paper, not just in your head. So you can kind of look at, okay, over the scope of the day or over the scope of this past week, how much of it was like really good, like nourishing food, and how much of it was just like sugar or processed stuff. And then you can kind of see where your current baseline is, and there might be some red flags that jump out at you. I mean, this is something that I love supporting people with. If people need support with this sort of stuff, this is what we teach in our Adrenal Recovery Revolution membership program. And the work that I do one on one with clients is like showing people how to figure out the right macros for you. Because for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different. But long story short, it's just like is going to show you the big picture and allow you to take inventory of certain foods. And from there, you can get even more specific, like which of those foods did you feel really good after eating, or did you have any red flag symptoms or symptoms that arise after a certain meal? Like if you can take note of those and put those connections together, you're going to be all the more aware to like make a more empowered decision based on what you've been eating.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great tip. So my fitness pal, I love that. And then I love the idea, yeah, of matching symptoms. You know, that's a really key part of journaling and writing down what you eat, right? Is really connecting with those the symptoms that might be you might not be connecting to food at all. And so that can be quite a cool awareness to have.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so another big question we get, people come to us every day asking, like, there are so many diets that out there, right? Between keto and cleanses and fasting and gluten-free and all that kind of stuff. Um, is there any diet that you recommend specifically for adrenal fatigue that tends to be better than others for the majority of people?
This is a really fantastic question. And
Loaded.
yeah, I want to say there's a time and place for certain types of diets. Um, when I created my recipe book, the Eat for Energy recipe book, I did incorporate aspects of the autoimmune paleo diet, which is a elimination style diet where you eliminate most of those offending foods. So that sort of elimination style diet can be really beneficial for people who are really struggling right now with food in general and reacting to a lot of foods, because it's kind of a catch-all for a lot of people's symptoms because you're taking so much out. But I just want to reiterate that this is not necessarily supposed to be a forever diet in a lot of cases. So it can be more of an exploratory diet that you could go and try out to just kind of get back to a baseline of feeling a bit better if you've been feeling really down and out for a little bit. So you're kind of taking everything out for a bit, doing a more autoimmune paleo style diet. But then again, it's great, but then how do you move forward once you've done that? Once you've cut those things out and you're feeling better, do you just keep doing that forever? Oftentimes there's some work that needs to be done behind the scenes with your gut, with your gut, with your adrenals, all across the body, really. And it's going to vary from person to person, but you really want to be doing that work alongside a diet like this so that it doesn't necessarily keep you stuck in eating that same way and so rigidly for so long. And of course, this is really individual, but um, that's why I incorporated it in the book for people who are really struggling. And then there's another meal plan and other sorts of recipes in the book that are a little bit more flexible and a little bit less restrictive for people who are more starting out on their journey with food. But it can be tricky, and a lot of people have tons of questions around this. And you mentioned keto, right? So I just wanted to bring that up because it's one that so many people have questions about. And like, do I think keto's okay for adrenal fatigue? And again, I want to say there's a time and there's a place, but in my opinion, I found that it's not truly sustainable. It has its therapeutic purposes, but I find a lot of people with adrenal issues who are really burnt out, they do okay having more of those starchy carbs and more of those whole grains in their diet if they're digesting things well, because those can be such energizing foods. So, yes, there's a time and place, but it's not always something like keto is not necessarily like the diet I'd go to for adrenal fatigue, but some people would beg to differ because they've done it and they loved the way they feel on it. So it's just hard to say. But yeah, does that make sense to you, Angela?
It does. And the cookbook, again, is a great place to start if you don't have that already. It's a lovely book, and I feel that it's something I use every day. And it's all one of those things where, like you mentioned, there's a focus for the cookbook, but it's also, there's a lot of flexibility, right? If you aren't, if you're dairy free, then you'll stick to more of those different milks. And if you want to put, you just can kind of put your own twist on a lot of your recipes. So I feel like it's really versatile as well, which I like.
Yeah, I wanted it to be like nothing set in stone. And a lot of people have told me that those recipes have kind of become staples in just the way that they meal
Yes.
prep and then the way that they plan their meals for the week or the way that they eat day to day. But then it also gives you a really good understanding of just like types of foods that could be nourishing if you're depleted and burnt out. And then, like I said, there's plans for beginners, but there's also plans for people who've struggled for a long time and want that more direct autoimmune paleo style approach where you're kind of being more rigid for a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Okay. So that that was a really nice breakdown. And I'm just kind of thinking for people who are just, again, feeling overwhelmed where they're at right now, not really knowing where to start. Um, what would be your first recommendation? Where does someone start?
Yeah, and I think coming back to that first question is where you're looking kind of at the big picture. Look at that big picture, and it doesn't necessarily mean like doing my fitness pal and tracking so intensely. I mean, I certainly recommend it if you have the energy and like the kind of curiosity to do that because it can be so empowering. But even just like sitting down for a moment, kind of getting grounded in yourself and just kind of thinking about like again the big picture and what you've been eating, what kind of foods you've been eating, what your portions have been like. Think about like what is going to make a big impact for you. And so it could be food quality. And that's a big one for a lot of people, just like improving the quality of your food, improving the portion sizes. So if you've been overeating, maybe cutting back and balancing. Again, in my Eat for Energy recipe book, I show you how to balance out your plates for more balanced blood sugar and just like healthier portions. Um, but also, if you a big problem with a lot of people who have a lot of food anxiety, they might find when they go and do something like MyFitnessPal is so many people tend to undereat. And so if you're not eating enough, that can be really empowering to just have that awareness to have more snacks and maybe build up a little bit more robust meals at each meal. Just to make sure that you're getting enough to fully fuel yourself and support your metabolism and just support your body really full heartedly. So portions is a big one. And then thinking about like your day to day, right? Like how can you make it easy and reduce any paths or resistance when it comes to picking foods and making those choices that you want to make? Because when you're tired, you already have that one level of resistance there. You're exhausted and you probably don't want to when you're hungry, you probably don't want to be in that moment creating like a meal. And so if you can, and there's kind of two different ways that you can do this. If you have a lot of stuff in the house that is easy to go to that you feel isn't supportive, it's like about getting rid of it, right? So if it's not there, that's a path. It's one more step of resistance for you to like actually eat those foods that you don't want to eat that aren't supportive to you right now. So get those out of the house. And then on the other side of that is like, what can you buy or what can you prep ahead of time that makes it really easy for you to make better choices or good choices in those moments when you're hungry and feeling tired. So thinking
Love it.
about that and then get
Okay.
support if you need it because truly what it's about and it kind of this circles back through all the questions you've kind of already asked is about creating something sustainable and like sustainably nourishing for your body and to kind of like help you overcome the state of depletion that you're currently in but also prevent you from getting back there or getting back here again in the future. So you really want to make this a lifestyle thing. And that's why it's not so much about a fad diet or doing like a more hardcore diet, which, like I said, has its time and place, but it's really about doing that work, maybe for a little bit, getting to the root of your gut issues, getting to the root full heartedly of some of your issues so that you can have a more balanced and free diet with a lot less anxiety, a lot less guilt, and a lot less worry moving forward with your nutrition.
Great. Okay. So Definitely getting support. I think I just wanted to mention that, like, there are ways to get support, whether it's through our membership program or working one-on-one, or if you need that accountability. Like, if this is something that is a barrier you feel like to your recovery, but you also know it's like the hardest, right, like prong of the recovery picture for you, then like that's when you need to get the support, and just be okay with, like, that's what I need support with. I know myself, and if I want to get to where I need to be, I might need to invest in that. So just wanted to share that. And then one point that you mentioned, which I think is interesting, is the undereating.
Yeah.
That was interesting just to hear you say, because we always talk about this, is that adrenal fatigue is a condition of depletion. So whether that depletion is coming from, not eating enough, or like you mentioned, the quality of food. So like the foods that you are eating don't have enough minerals and vitamins, and the things that your body is maybe lacking right now and has been for some time. So I thought that was just interesting. I wanted to shed some more light on it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's where MyFitnessPal or an app like that where you're tracking can be so great because you can track the macros. But then when you're looking at the big picture and you're looking at the quality of foods, you're like, oh, well, like, am I eating legumes and grains and nuts and seeds and all these colorful, nutritious foods to get those calories? Or are all those calories coming from things like bagels and just like cheese and sauces and not so much of the nutritious stuff? And so it just gives you that bigger picture perspective. And then from there, you can pick and choose what's going to be the most important battle for you right now with the energy that you have. Yeah, but
Awesome.
definitely about nourishing your body back up. And it's so common when people have food anxiety too, like it can put you in a freeze state where you just don't want to eat anything because you're afraid of how your body's going to react. And in those cases, I really encourage you to just get support with that because that's something that you can break free of and it's so important that you do. It's going to be such a crucial part of your recovery. And so like the quicker that you can get some support to just get clarity and confidence in how you could be eating for your body to help you get to the next level of your recovery is going to be really, really important and so profound.
Yeah, and I think what you just shared is like hit home for me, because it was such a big part of my story, and probably yours too, but just that point where you were like reacting to everything you ate. And so
Yeah.
that can be a really, yeah, scary place, and just not a very fun place, and a place where, yeah, there's a lot of, you feel very overwhelmed, and then you do, like you said, you're in a state of like freeze where you don't eat much at all. And we have a lot of clients who come to us where they're definitely not eating enough to nourish themselves. Okay, so that brings me to this idea of, the taking things out, right? So a lot of people, we talk about how important it is to take out foods, and one of them, offending foods like gluten and dairy. And so how is it important for everybody? What's your take on that? Gluten and dairy.
And that's the thing. So a lot of people feel really good when they cut out some of these, I want to say, like hugely inflammatory or offending foods for so many. So gluten and dairy are in there, up there amongst the top 5 most common allergenic foods or reactive foods for people. So it's gluten, dairy, soy, nuts, and like shellfish. And so oftentimes people are eating a lot of soy, but I mean, nuts and shellfish, we aren't necessarily eating in like the same quantities we're eating the dairy and the gluten. So those two tend to be biggies. And when we take them out, you might notice a really big difference. And so it's interesting. And I had this question actually pop up last week, and they were saying that until you cut certain foods out, you don't truly know how those foods might be making you feel. So a lot of people go about their day to day feeling like they do fine with dairy or they do fine with gluten. Some people really clearly know that they don't. And those people, and like this was me, I still ate some of those foods because they were just delicious. And I had like these food addictions back in that like period of my life. So I continued eating these foods, even though I knew they weren't supportive. Some I reacted to a lot more than others, though. So for me, gluten was never like aggressive digestive issues like we would commonly think when we're looking for like food disturbances when it comes to symptoms. So for me, gluten was a lot more mental, emotional, and I didn't notice until I cut it out. And I'm not saying cut it out for a day, cut it out for 3 days. It took me probably a good week to um, really start noticing how gluten had a grip on me and how it was actually making me feel. And I had to cut it out for a longer period of time. And it's almost like you establish a new baseline, right? And that's why the autoimmune paleo approach as a kind of a catch-all can be supportive, because you do it for like 30 to 60 to 90 days. You do it for a while and you establish this new baseline where you aren't reacting to all these foods anymore, and you realize like how good you can actually feel. And then when you bring these certain foods back in, then you're so much more aware of how those foods were making you feel. So for some people, it's really obvious and you'll take them out and you'll notice a big shift. Other people, it might take a couple days or a couple weeks for you to really like notice the difference. So does everybody need to cut them out? I want to say no. But I feel like if you're really struggling and you've tried a lot of things and you're having a lot of digestive issues right now, or you're having a lot of mood and kind of emotional imbalances right now, I think it doesn't hurt to just start there, especially with a couple of those big ones. And it's not to say those foods can't come back in down the road again, right? Like sometimes it's about removing them, doing a little bit of this gut work. And this is the work that we love doing too, like getting to the root of what's going on with your gut, healing and sealing up that lining. If you have a lot of inflammation going on after every time you eat, once you've done that work, you'll be able to tolerate more foods again. And that's the hope I love giving people who've just gotten those food sensitivity reports back, and everything's red, right? They're reacting to everything and it can be so overwhelming. That can create a lot of food anxiety because you're like, I feel like I can't eat anything. And this is where you really have to pull back and like, don't throw your hands up and feel like you're never going to eat these foods again. It's just an indication that there's something going on from an immune perspective, from a gut perspective, from a hormonal perspective. Like we need to address the big picture and work on that. And you're probably not going to react to all of those foods forever. And so you just kind of have to like do the work for a bit. And once you've done that work, you can eat a lot of, and a lot, we see this with a lot of our clients. Like a lot of our clients are bringing those foods back. I mean, some of the foods are like vegetables and fruits, like things you would never think would be throwing you off, right? Like
Right.
healthy foods. And so it just gives people hope. If you've had some of those food sensitivity tests come back, it's like, okay, it's time to do some work, because this is an indication of something bigger, not just like your body going crazy on food all of a sudden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody has these food sensitivity tests and they're allergic to everything, that's a good sign that maybe they should be, playing with this eliminating foods, right? What are some other signs or symptoms that you would say, like, of what when somebody should take this approach of maybe cutting out some more things like dairy and gluten?
Yeah. So like the digestive symptoms, if you're having a lot of like skin reactions, if you just look at yourself in the mirror and you feel like you look so inflamed, like look, and I'm not just talking about acne, but like the redness and like like even the colors of your eyes and the texture of your skin. I want you to like look at all that and just think of your body. Does your body look like a healthy, nourished body? And if you're struggling with a lot of fatigue, a lot of insomnia, a lot of mood things, because the gut and the mood and our brain are so, so intricately connected, right? And so I feel like if you're really struggling with your mental health right now, if you're really struggling with fatigue, your skin, digestion, those are the big ones. And those are really good signs alongside those allergy tests, or those food sensitivity tests coming back with like raging, lots of red flags, that you could probably benefit from cutting some of this stuff out.
Okay, I love that answer. So yeah, just really looking at yourself and just seeing what if you feel like you look like a nourished person. I think that was really, yeah, I love that. Okay, so this has been really fun. I know this has been helpful for everyone out there. I do have like one question I'd love to ask you more on a
Yeah.
personal note about your own journey, as I know just like everyone on our team has, overcome burnout at some level. And having overcome stage 3 burnout yourself, what was it for you in regards to food, particularly, that really made a difference in your recovery and you saw like the biggest shifts?
That's a great question, and I haven't thought about it for a while. So, I think for me, I truly had to get real with myself, because I was the type of person who was really reacting to a lot of foods and not necessarily like always cutting them out, and like just reminding people, like when I really struggled, I was in my mid 20s, right? I like was just like out socially and stuff and like not really accepting my health where it was at the time. So I had to really, I eventually kind of got forced to the point where I had to get really real with myself as to like what foods it was time to like put a hard line in the sand for a bit and say no to. Those were things like gluten and dairy. Those were really big ones for me. But also looking at my diet, big picture at the time was like profound for me. And at the time, I was eating a vegetarian, borderline vegan diet. And I had all these digestive issues. And I just had this kind of intuitive hit and also cravings. Like my body was kind of craving fish and meat. And like at first, it started off when I was like not even thinking about those foods. Like I just was dreaming about peanut butter and like nut butter, like protein, fatty protein sources, and I wasn't feeling satiated. And so I just had this like inner itch in me that was like something needs to change, and I don't feel like I'm thriving right now. I definitely like I can't eat anything. I don't feel like I'm thriving on this diet anymore. And so I I had to kind of get real with that vegetarian lifestyle, and I started incorporating more meats, and I was mindful about the quality of the meats, but kind of going more towards a paleo style of eating while I started doing more gut work. And so doing that gut work was so important, but also kind of like cutting out those offending foods like the gluten, like the dairy, which as a vegetarian at the time, um, like I was relying on them a little bit more frequently than like I do than I would have if I wasn't vegetarian, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, yeah, I
It
kind of
does
had to
make
get
sense.
restrictive in some ways and less restrictive in others. But it was so personal, right? And doing the gut work was so important too, because there was food freedom for me on the other side of that work. Like I couldn't, like the dairy got to a point where I couldn't have it at all. And it was a bit of a long journey, so there's like different kind of like stages to this, but there was a point when I couldn't have the dairy at all, and then nowadays I can have dairy and not react like I used to. Like I don't have those digestive upsets anymore, and I don't get like really itchy from dairy like I used to. Mind you, I'm mindful about like how much I eat and the types of dairy that I eat these days, but before it was like a hard no, and now it's like a sometimes I can have it in moderation, but I don't have those reactions because I've done that work.
Love it.
So
And you
yeah.
probably have a strong, healthy gut as well, which always helps.
Yeah, but I had to do the work to make it
Do the
healthy
work to get
again.
it there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not an overnight thing. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's fun to hear about other people's, maybe not fun, it's just, it's good to hear from other people and for their journeys and what they're going through. And so thank you for sharing that about your story. It's very similar to mine as well. So,
Is it was what was different
well,
for you or
yeah, well,
what
I
was
was
similar?
vegetarian for 10 years at that point when I was diagnosed, I had been vegetarian for about 10 years up to that point. Um, and then I, started eating meat again after an integrative doctor suggested it. And even though it was hard for me to do ethically and environmentally, all sorts of different reasons. And um, and I was also, and then I, had to go gluten free at that point. And so anyway, it was just changing. It was like I was used to already eliminating things from my diet, but now I was switching up, like switching it up completely
Yeah.
to eliminating other things and bringing in, the meat. And so it was just a change. And I had to just be okay with, what this is really what my body needs right now. And so, and again, I had to do a lot of gut work, a lot of elimination, a lot of gut work too. So, unfortunately, that sometimes comes with the territory, and it's just, I think, part of it these days, and just what we eat and our diets, what our diets are consumed and are consumed of, and the fast-paced world that we live in. It's just the gut takes a toll. Stress puts like a lot of stress on the gut, and I mean that's a big other conversation for another time, but
Yeah. We've got
just
podcasts on
exactly.
that.
This has been really, really fun talking about food myths. Thank you so much, Danielle, for talking with us today about this and kind of breaking some of these myths.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I honestly feel like there could be a part two to this because I feel like we're really just scratching the surface. But for those of you listening out there, I hope this kind of gives you just some clarity and some confidence in where you can start in your day to day now if you're feeling tired or if you're having that food anxiety. And it's really like looking at the big picture and picking one thing and like one thing that you can handle this week and just start there. And like I said, you can build on it later, but it starts with baby steps when you're tired. And even like Angela and I noticed when we were sharing our stories, like there's so much, we were like, oh, it's so hard. Like it's hard to change those habits, especially when you're tired, especially if you're changing like some ethical stuff that and like morals that you have attached to your diet. Like that can be very challenging. So having the right type of support if you need it can be really helpful because you're not going to need it forever, right? It's a big transition. So having support through the transition can be just like such a nice thing to gift yourself if you're in the midst of that. And so if that's something we can help you with, come join us in the Adrenal Recovery Revolution and we'll coach you through it. We'll give you lots of meal plans and we'll make sure that you just feel fully nourished and confident in the way that you're eating. But yeah, I really hope that this episode has served you. And Angela, thanks for all the great questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for your wisdom, my friend. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again soon.